right, so arrays, really cool thing here. Arrays are exciting. They're another one of the things that we're going to use a lot. There's a lot of different methods that we're going to learn, different functions you can use for arrays. And this should be a pretty straightforward little video here. This should be a lot easier than the last two lectures, I promise. And I know those ones were hard, and I want to apologize for them being hard, but that's also part of web programming, is what it is. Anyways, we're gonna move on. So let me remember to change the screen. Woohoo! All right, no more recursion for a while. So we're gonna do arrays now. So what are arrays? So arrays, under the hood, arrays are, you remember our grid of computer memory. We have all of our little squares that we put information in. An array is like a collection of those squares. And so each of those squares has one data value put in there. That might be a set of strings, that might be integers, that might be a combination of things. I don't recommend doing that, but you can. Because things like that tend to break, but we'll talk about that later too. But yeah, so you can have an array of things, and essentially what happens is each one of those boxes in memory has one value, and you can use them all as one set, as a collection. And we'll see what that looks like. They're often in Python, they're called lists. It's the same thing. They have slightly different rules between languages for how exactly they handle them, but it's basically the same. Basically the same. So we're going to see what this looks like. So first of all, let's just create an array, right? Create an array. And we're going to see let group of names equals Jerry, Ben, Bash, Brock, and Misty. I think that my coworker who wrote some of this curriculum was a Pokemon fan. All right, cool. So so now we've got this is our collection of things. And you see we use these square braces to say, hey, I want to make a list here. I want to make an array, and everything inside of that array is we have a series of items. So like our first location in memory. So we've got our little squares. The first square holds Jerry, the next square holds Ben, the next square holds Bash, then Brock, and then Misty, and they each get one kind of square in our mental array, our memory set here. And so that's great. Cool. We have a series of strings in computer memory somewhere. What if I want to get back just one of those values? And again, I want you to think of this as like a series of names that exists these memory locations. I want you to think of them again like houses with people living inside them, right? So you have an address in memory, and then there's a value that exists there, and we're going to find ways of and I just want to think logically about this, right? Like if I want to pull back just Jerry, theoretically, we could say, well, if I were designing the language, how would I identify and say, I want just that one value there, right? You could do something like this, console.log, group of names, Jerry, right? Or we could do it like this, but there's a problem here. Like that looks like a function, doesn't it? Okay, that's not very useful to do it that way. And so we get one other way we could do this would be like, what if we did like, Jerry? And that would be cool, but we end up getting an error there as well. It's a good idea, but we still end up with problems. Undefined, what is that? I don't know. Oh dear. We're still getting not a number from our previous one. So now I refresh this, and now we should get, there we go. Cool, great, now I'm happy. All right, I just had to do that for my own sanity. Actually, the best way that we do this is by putting the number of their location, right? So we have, we can actually put this in, I'll show you. This is just a nifty trick if you're ever like kind of confused about this. Again, just throwing things in Python Tutor is just a very, very good way to explain to your brain what's happening under the hood, because they slow things down, and code moves fast, like as fast as electricity moves, which is quite quick. So this is pretty straightforward. But we have global frame, so we've got an object. We've got this array as the data type. Another data type. We got our data type is array, and then inside it we have each of these things. And we actually have their locations in memory. So again, these look like little boxes in a row for a reason. Wow, it's almost like Brandon wasn't lying to you about what's happening under the hood. How cool is that? It's really nice having teachers that aren't lying to you. So, but we have a series of boxes in a row, and this group of names is the name of this array in memory, and we have our different things. Now, these little gray numbers here, that's actually the number we would use to find their location from that array. And this is, so we say, oh, well, I want Jerry, right? I'm going to give back 1. And when I run this, we don't get back Jerry. We get back Ben. And you might say, wait a second, hang on a minute. But Jerry's first. Now, again, so computers work this way for a reason. And the 0 index thing, some of that comes down to like binary, right? We've talked about how like it starts with 0s and 1s. And there's some other reasons. We'll get to more into that kind of as we go. But we actually do 0 indexing. So you'll hear me say like, oh, the 0th index of group of names is Jerry, or the 1th index. And that just helps us keep it a little bit different in our head, the 2th, 3th, 4th, etc. Rather, I mean, that's me personally. I'm an educator, and so that just helps it for clear conversation, communication, what I'm talking about. So the 0th index of group of names is Jerry. There we go. So we got Ben and Jerry as our first 2. So that's great. And we'll have a few exercises with this. We'll have some homework on these, so it should be pretty good. All right, so we're gonna do. There's a variety of array methods. We're not gonna use all of them. We're gonna have a look at a few of them. But I'm just gonna copy paste these over. There are great websites for figuring out these things, and a lot of these are pretty straightforward. We've actually seen this before. This .concat function. Where we have something and we concatenate something else to it. Let's have a look here. W3. And we're going to use, let's look at .pop JavaScript. So W3 Schools is a really good resource. It's very straightforward, very useful website that has just really easy to read and interact with. It's actually interactive things here. And it will tell us what each of these things are and what they do. I'll go over a few of these. I'm not going to go over all of them, but we will see most of these throughout the rest of the course. And yeah, I also clearly am not teaching every single thing that you could possibly learn about JavaScript. Again, my goal here is to get you from not knowing JavaScript to able to do things in JavaScript and be independent, right? My goal is not to babysit you all the way to knowing every single thing about JavaScript ever, period. That would be impossible because people are always coming up with new things for JavaScript and changing it a little bit. But the core things, those are things we're going to really focus on and make sure that you understand those, as well as some advanced concepts so you can keep growing on your own. Cool. So anyways, let's look at this. We got const fruits and nifty. So right now, banana, orange, apple, mango. You can see this is an HTML thing too. Remember I talked about how you can run scripts inside of HTML. Please go away. Thanks. But yeah, so now we've got this here, and yeah, document get element by ID, and we're going to spit out our fruits. Don't worry about what this is yet. We're going to get to, again, this is how web stuff works. But we've popped something from fruits, and now fruits no longer has mango. So it removes the last element of an array. Obviously, mango was the last one there. If we really wanted to, we could even just take this over to here. If you're really curious, just wanted to see that. It's pretty straightforward, but always a good time. And once it's done running, we have fruits, and after the line about popping happens, it's gone. It's gone. One other thing to note here is that you can actually return. It actually brings it back whatever you. Okay, great. Let's do this instead. Let's say let my popped fruit equal fruits.pop, and we're going to actually end up logging my popped fruit. Okay, and this is where this gets useful, right? So not only are we removing something from the end, but you can actually use it someplace else. We can save it to another thing, which is really great for things like filtering lists, which is a very common thing to have to do. So my popped fruit is mango. We've removed it from here and saved it to the value my popped fruit, and now we can spit out just the value mango. And this array still exists. It just no longer has the 3th element, which is great. Cool. So that's like pop. And we'll go back over here and look at a few other of these ones. R to string will actually take this whole thing. Actually, let's try this just for funsies. Dot to string. We need to call the little parentheses because this is a function. It's not an attribute of group of names. When we use dot notation, usually it's an attribute of something, but inside of strings, and we'll get to this in a moment too with prototypes. Actually, we're not going to get to this right this now. We'll talk about this later. But just keep in mind that when you use a dot thing, it gives you access to a lot of things about the thing you're talking about. So again, you dot, all of these are things that you could use. Well, not those ones. Those are things that are from my code. But these are all things we could use and attributes, and we can see what those are. But we're going to use to string. We can actually scroll down and find it. You can hover over it, and it even gives you some instructions about it. How cool is that? So if you're ever curious, I don't know what this does, now you know. And this is how you're supposed to use it. So we have an array of some sort, okay? And we got a group of names that is, in fact, an array. And in this case, it takes strings. And yeah, so we got toString. And it ends up spitting out a string at the end as well. If you ever check out TypeScript, a lot of these little things in here, like this or this, they will make more sense to you as well. But let's have a look at what happens over here. We're going to refresh this, and now this is just one string, right? So we've logged it, and it's not an array anymore, right? There's no square braces on it. It's just the characters. It's just a string data type. So we could even do type of, I believe is the function. Type of is not defined. I guess I could use is instance of. We're not going to do that. This is going to bore you, and it's too much of me screwing around. All right, so toString. Dot join is another one. So we could do dot join, and I'm going to give a space, right? So again, we've got a space in here. You can see that there's that little dot there saying there's a space. Let's just do it without it first, and we'll see what this does. And no spaces in between them. It just stuck them all together. It still returned a string, but it's crunched them together. There's no commas this time. If I do a space, go back here, and now there's a space between them. You can put anything you want to in the middle. Cool, great. That's a nifty trick. Push is going to add something to it. So let's do push. And we're logging the results. So the first thing that's going to happen here, we have a little bit of, you remember from math class, we had PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. We had parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. And code kind of has the same thing here, where it's going to resolve whatever is in here first. It's going to go to the smallest, deepest level of functions, operate those, and then work its way out until it's done. So first thing it's going to do is push Brandon to group of names, and then it's going to log it. And it gave me back the length for some reason. Let's just add it first, and then we'll log group of names. That wasn't what I expected, but this is part of coding. It's just like figuring out, wait, why didn't that do what I expected? There we go. All right, so now we have this whole thing, and it's an array of length 6. Again, so it's going to give you the length of the thing first. There's 6 things here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But Brandon, it says 6. Well, again, there's still 6 items in there. Just the indexes start with 0, right? Which is another thing to keep aware of as you're thinking about this. So 6 things in here. And if we click on this, actually the console is helpful enough to actually like show us what they are. And there you go. There's their indices and the length overall. And the data type, the prototype here, is an array, which is useful too. And then once you click on this, you get to actually see all the things you can do to an array. So there again, we can get to string as a function. We've got pop as a function. And I mean, if you really want to get into the depths of it, like what is a function and what do functions do, blah, 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 that's a little bit too deep. But these are all different things you can do to an array data type. So that's cool too. So you see, this looks like an awful lot of stuff. We're going to learn a few of these. But again, these are just different attributes of the thing you've been given. And that's kind of what JavaScript's actually built off of, where the next lesson is going to be objects and prototypes and what those look like exactly. But we're going to get more familiar with how this thing appeared. Because in Python, there's none of this kind of thing. Lots of other languages don't have this. I think it's really nifty. I think it's really cool. The prototype thing is a little confusing. But the things it gives you the ability to do are very useful. So anyways, so there you go. So now we've added Brandon to our list of names, or our group of names. Cool. All right, let's see. So the rest of these, you can look these up on W3. That actually will probably be homework for you, because part of programming is finding your own stuff. If you're coming from Python, there is no minimum or maximum functions. There is a dot sort, I believe. Yep, dot sort. And so what you would do if you wanted to find the maximum value of a function would be sort it, and then either pop the last value to get that back, or use shift, which removes the first element and returns it. So it's like pop, but it does it with the first element instead of the last one. And then delete. With delete is a little bit annoying because it replaces the value with an undefined value instead of just removing it altogether. And yeah, push adds it to your array. And then concatenate, you can actually push multiple values at once if you're using concat. Great. One other thing, where are we at? 15 minutes. Cool. We'll get through this. We should move a little bit faster now. Past the theory and into just writing some cool code now. So let's do let Terry, Ben, and Misty. And what we're going to do is, this is called deconstruction. And this is an interesting thing here. Deconstruction. You can actually just like automatically save values and pass them back and forth. There's some really cool things we can do with this that we'll see later on in some of our more ornate code. So we're going to say Terry, Misty, and Ben. Okay, interesting. Equals group of names. And then we're going to console.log Terry, Ben, and Misty. And we're going to see what this looks like, right? So again, look at it, check it out. So first of all, Terry, Misty, Ben, and then Terry, Ben, Misty. Notice that they're in a different order, okay? And our first three things here are Jerry, Ben, and Bash. And we could have just used like numbers, or there's any number of other variable types that we could have just used here. I probably shouldn't have used Ben and Misty. Let's do Jen and Zisty. So then we'll come back here, Zisty. And again, it's going to be mad about Ben. It's going to go, I don't know what that is. And so we're just going to go to Jen here. And again, it's giving us these dots. I couldn't find it. What are you talking about? Did you mean Zisty? Yes. And we'll put Jen here. Cool. So now that those are different names, we'll be able to see what that looks like. And we're going to log that. That will all go away here. Jerry, Bash, Ben. Okay. So again, Jerry was first. So that's Terry now. Bash, it was, I think, Jen. No, it's Zisty. No, it's Jen. And then our third thing, which was Bash, is right there. So Ben. Anyways, you can see that mixed with the order of it. And that's actually a really nifty trick. We'll see this later with our algos lesson for rearranging things in an array that we know the size of. Or a lot of sorting algorithms use this same kind of a thing. But that's deconstruction. And yeah, essentially you're assigning, let's do something cool. Like I said, you can just plug everything into Python Tutor and it makes more sense to you. And it's also really great as a teaching tool because it slows it down enough that I don't have to try to explain things that you can't see. So we're going to get it so that we can see. And specifically, I want to get to the point where that line occurs. There we go. So it actually took 3 steps. So again, what it's doing is taking Terry, so the first, second, or the 0th, 1th, and 2th values, 0th, 1th, and 2th. So our 0th is going to be Jerry, and our 1th is going to be Ben. Oh, Zisty, because we put these in a different order, but that's fine. And then our 2th, Jen, is going to end up being Bash, and then we're going to log those back out. So that's what's going on under the hood. That's what deconstruction is. It doesn't have to be just 3 things. It can be any number as long as it's less than the length of the array that you're feeding it. I would assume, maybe you want to try this, if you gave it more values than the array had, like if this is an array of length 2 or 3, and you give it like 5 things to deconstruct, I would guess they probably would put just undefined or not a number in there. Just based on how JavaScript works. Undefined is an undesirable value to have, so that would not be a good thing to do. But anyways, all right, let's do some other stuff. A couple different ways of looping through an array. couple different ways to do this. So we're gonna do function show all the names, and we're gonna not take anything in particular here. I guess we could put the group of names in, but we're just gonna hard code this for today. This wouldn't be necessarily how I would recommend writing this in the wild. You know what? Actually, no, forget it. I'm going to put R in here, and we're going to call it with the function. We're going to do this. We're going to do this the right way. All right. So for let I equals 0, and while R dot length is less than while I is less than R dot length. There we go. That makes more sense. And we're going to iterate by 1 each time, so that's fine there. And then we will console.log R, and then we're going to pass in I. Now that looks a little bit crazy, looks a little wild, but let's think about this for a second, right? What's going to be happening is it's going to go through whatever array we feed it. So in this case, we're going to end up feeding a group of names. We're just going to use that as our example. So we're going to start at 0. Okay, so I, for the very first loop, is going to be equal to 0. So this is just R, this is just group of names, 0. The 0th index of group of names. We want to pull that back and then log it. That's what's going on here. And we're going to keep doing this until our array length is met, right? So we're just going to keep doing this until we get to the very last value. And we're going to go up by 1 every time. So every time that this loop happens, this is going to start at 0, but after that loop occurs, it's going to add 1 and go to 1. So we're going to print out Jerry first at group of names 0, and then Ben is going to be a group of names 1. Again, if this is complex, just throw it in Python Tutor, and then we're going to return done. Just because, and we could even just return 1 if we wanted to. It's a pretty common way for reporting a success because again, it ends up being truthy. There is a value there. The function did run. It is occurred. It is finished. Often an error code will be returned 0, depending on kind of what you're doing. All right, so console.log show all names. I'm going to pass in group of names. Okay, so now I should be able to come here and it should spit them all out one by one. Whee! There we go. So they all came out one at a time and it ended up returning 1 at the end as a success code. We'll see that with web development, that success codes and being specific can be very useful. If you've ever gotten a 404 error or a 503 error, those are things you see on the website, on the web all the time where you try and go to a website that doesn't exist and it gives you a 404. That's an example of an error code. Great, and we just gave it a success code instead. Cool. Another way we could do it is a little bit of fun. For each takes a function, then it does something to it. We're going to see this more later on in this lesson. We're just going to kind of speed through this, and we'll come back and revisit it later. Console.log group of names for each, and this is going to say for each item in something that we can iterate over, do something to it. So we have to define what the do something is and then pass that in, right? So this is the array that we're doing it to, right? And then what are we going to do to it? Well, for each element in group of names, what we want to do, and we're going to use the arrow function to do this, we're going to console.log that element, okay? So each element is going to be a name, ultimately. Each is going to be one of these. And for each one of them that's in there, we want to end up logging that out to the console. So this also will do the same thing. Cool. This one, there's a problem, right? It doesn't actually return anything. And that's why it's maybe not the best way to do it for right now until we understand for each a little bit better, but it will give us what we need to as far as just showing that. I think we probably could just return it. Oh, that's actually probably part of our issue. Let's try that. Let's try that. Return element. And because we're logging this whole thing anyways, oh, I guess we have to have that in parentheses for it to be happy. It should be in these, I would think. And we need one more. There we go. All right, now we're all happy. Let's see if this actually does what it's supposed to. And it's undefined. So no, it didn't do what we wanted to, so we're just going to go back here. For each is kind of wonky and not how I would recommend doing it personally. Some people like it, but you should just know that it exists. All right. And we already talked about to string, so I don't need that. That's okay. Nice. Great. All right. Last little section here. We just have a couple of array thingummies, as well as some frightening things. But it should be cool. Not that frightening. It's just ugly and not code that you should do in real life. But I'm going to show you bad code so you know what not to do and why not to do it. So we're going to say let sum array equals 1, 2, 3, 4. This is fine and dandy. And we're going to say console.log sum array.length. Okay. We'll try this first. Let's try this and see what happens. And we get 4. That's kind of odd. But again, that's because we are actually going to find our array, and it is an attribute. The length here is something we can actually utilize there. Okay, great, cool, whatever. This is kind of whack. Don't do this. Instead, do this. Console.log sum array. And we've actually already seen this using dot notation. And then it's nice and happy. It actually shows us what it's being given. We've used dot length before on arrays of all different kinds. And so we get the right thing back. It's just much better. And normal. Great. That's normal because it's better. All right, let's see. And one other example, console.log sum array. You will do this one day because you won't be thinking, especially if you're coming from Python, you'll be like, oh yeah, I can just use this function here and that'll be great. Well, that returns an error. Length is not a function. It's an attribute of the thing. So we're not actually running the length function on it. So I'm gonna just comment that out there and that'll be fine. All right, great. Let's see. Console.log. We're going to pass in 1, 2, apple, 4. Now, you're probably thinking, actually, you're probably not thinking because I haven't told you yet, but don't mix data types in arrays. Just don't do it. It's a bad idea. It's very unsafe. It's unusual. Part of the reason why it's unsafe and unusual is what if I wrote a loop of some sort to add 1 to every value in this array? What would happen when we add 1 to apple? Well, we've seen before that if you add 1 to a string, you just get apple 1. And that's probably not what we actually wanted to do here. We were trying to add 1 to the value of the thing, and that's unexpected behavior. And again, one of the things we have to fight constantly in JavaScript is unexpected behavior. That is something we are going to diligently war against. And so that's part of why mixing things, or treating these all as strings, right? Like trying to concatenate with each of these. Like that's also not going to be something that we're going to want to do. So just keep in mind that that's going on. However, there is something we're going to do here. And so we're going to say dot includes apple. And this should spit out true. And it does. True. So dot includes is how to check within an array if something exists. Now try this out for size. Console.log apple dot include. Oh, wait, I thought that was a method that's meant for arrays, Brandon. I thought that was something you can only use on arrays. Well, guess what strings are under the hood? Guess how they are collected in memory? Strings are technically arrays under the hood. So again, an array in memory, right? You have your little memory boxes, and again, they can only hold 1 byte, right? Only one like chunk of data at a time. And so an array is just, or a string is an array, but each location in memory is just one like alphabetical character. And it just goes and says, this is my collection. And at the end of it, then it's done. So you can actually do things like loop over strings the same way that you would with an array, which is really cool. So yeah, strings are technically arrays under the hood, and this should also return true. Great, because Apple does in fact have the letter A inside of it. 2 more lines of code. So we're going to let new r equal 1, 2, we're going to do spaces here. We're going to be responsible. 2, 3, because styling is important. Great. Now, we've just said that strings are arrays under the hood. So this up here is technically an array of arrays. Just think about that for a second. You have each one of these is something you can loop over. So I could loop over each of these and then loop over inside of each one of those and print them out letter by letter. Because you can also do for loops inside of for loops, which is cool. But I can, in fact, just do this. Ooh, wow, that's pretty gnarly. Well, what if I do this? Which again is not good code writing, but I'm pointing out what you can do here. Again, putting arrays inside of arrays is very normal. Mixing data types in arrays is probably not very desirable because, again, that's where you get unexpected behavior. But this is still very expectable. You can still depend on what's going on here as far as what we're going to do to it. So what I can do is I can say console.log new r, and I can say 3. So again, what's the 3th? The 3th thing here, 0th, 1th, 2th, and this whole thing is our 3th item. So how would I get just guacamole back, right? Well, again, this will end up, it's actually a function under the hood when you call this is going to go and find that location. But now we have this entire piece here. Come on, this entire piece here. So how would I access this? Well, we've already returned this whole thing here, so we can actually just write another one. And now we should get guacamole printed out, which is marvelous, right? So that's how you would actually access things inside of other things. I don't think this will work in JavaScript. We'll find out. Theoretically, this should be G. It worked. Great. I know that works in Python. But so that's because, again, a string is just an array under the hood. So I've just pulled back the 0th item of guacamole, which is the letter G, right? So, and I can't obviously do that again because the next thing's not an iterable. So it's going to yell at me now and be like, you can't iterate over the letter G. Undefined. It doesn't know what to do, right? Which you would want it to say that that's not allowed, but instead it allows it and just calls it undefined instead because it's like, you didn't return anything, so I don't know what to do. But again, that's proof it is a function because undefined is what we get when a function doesn't return anything. And so in this case, we've called the function, which is this notation here. It doesn't look like a function, but anyways, I digress. But yeah, so there you go. So that's how you would identify strings or arrays inside of arrays inside of arrays in this case. I would probably get rid of this for your notes and just show this so that you can show how you got guacamole back. But anyways, up to you. And that is the end of our lecture on arrays. That was a little bit much, but again, I think this is a lot more straightforward than previous lectures were on closures and recursion. So hopefully this is more fun and easy, and we'll see some more cool stuff with what we can do with that going forward. Again, if you need to review things, that's fine. If you need to ask questions, that's fine. If W3 School's article on arrays is helpful too, that's fine with me. And again, the Eloquent JavaScript should have stuff on arrays too. That's very useful and very helpful. So cool beans, and I'll see you up next for objects. Pretty cool.